Good afternoon. This is your 28storms.com tropical weather update on this Wednesday, June 22nd. Now that Hurricane Beatrice has left the scene and is continuing to dissipate as a remnant low center, there is no immediate system of interest to discuss. However, it looks like in the 3 to 7 day range we're going to have a different story altogether, possibly in the Atlantic Basin. But here's a look at the current surface analysis, and as you can see, there's really not much across the Gulf or Caribbean and West Atlantic at this current time. However, keep an eye on that tropical wave now approaching 55 degrees west longitude. It's now bound for the lower half of the Lesser Antilles and Windward Islands. We also have a stalled frontal boundary over the southern plains and lower Mississippi Valley, and that's acting to enhance the daily thunderstorm activity across much of the western and central Gulf Coast, bringing some much needed rainfall. So that is much of what we're seeing across the northwest Gulf of Mexico and areas from Texas through Alabama. But keep in mind this is non-tropical in nature, so we're not worried about anything in that region today. And we also have a little flare-up of convection to the east of the Bahamas, but that's being enhanced by an upper level low, as we can see on the latest water vapor animation, and that's non-tropical in nature, so that's not a problem. But we still have that tropical wave that we talked about earlier. It's now going through the Windward Islands, and over the next 3 to 5 days it's going to continue tracking east to west across the entire Caribbean Sea, and by around day 5 it's going to be approaching Belize and the Yucatan Peninsula. And during that time, upper level conditions could become a little bit more favorable for development, and I have a strong suspicion that at the very least this will be the next invest of the 2011 hurricane season, meaning that the National Hurricane Center will be taking a very good look at this in the coming days, and some of the tropical model suite members will more than likely be run on our system. And yeah, this is definitely going to be a legit player down the road in all likelihood. But over the next 72 to 96 hours, we're not expecting any beginning of tropical development. The upper level winds across much of the Caribbean are just too unfavorable. As mentioned just a couple moments ago, we already have a bunch of upper level lows over the western Atlantic, and in association with those upper lows we have these strong westerly winds generating a lot of vertical wind shear, so we're not expecting anything in the short term from this wave. Again, here are those westerly winds, and we have 30 to 50 knots of wind shear currently in place. But as noted before, the models are beginning to show a bit more of a favorable picture out toward the west. This is now the day 4 GFS forecast, and as you can see, already by day 4, meaning Sunday afternoon, the GFS is already beginning to show this low pressure area beginning to organize to the east of Belize. And as we look further into the run, it does make a track over the Yucatan Peninsula, but it maintains its strength as a pretty strong area of low pressure. And as it continues to advance toward the northwest in the general direction of Texas, it still looks like a fairly robust tropical storm. The model correctly initializes the current westerly wind shear, as noted by these very darker colors over much of the Caribbean. But if we advance this is now the 96-hour time frame, we begin to see a little bit more upper level ridging just off the coast of Belize. And what's beginning to occur in the model run is an upper level low is going to split off from the troughiness over the southeast United States, and it's going to begin drifting more toward the southwest toward mainland Mexico, and out to the east of that upper level low it will help to act to pump in upper level ridge over much of the storm. As we begin to see by 120 hours, there's the upper level low beginning to split off from the trough, and as a result of that, down toward the south we're beginning to see a surge in upper level ridging directly over the Yucatan Peninsula. And now this is the day 7 forecast, and if we remember, this is when the tropical storm was supposed to be located to the southeast of Texas based on the GFS. And as we can see, that's a fairly strong and favorable upper level ridge located directly over the storm, with the main jet axis being located well to the north over the central Gulf Coast. So obviously this is a really good pattern if the GFS is correct. Now, the no gaps is not a very reliable model, but just to show you that several models are developing this in the Gulf of Mexico, this is the latest no gaps forecast, and as we can see, by 96 to 120 hours we see a strong developing low developing and moving across the Yucatan Peninsula, by day 6 moving into the central Gulf of Mexico. This is the latest 12Z Canadian forecast run. By 72 hours we begin to see a weak low develop east of Belize, and this is by day 6 we have a developing tropical storm. The only difference between the GFS no gaps and the Canadian is that the Canadian is a bit more intense with a smaller tropical cyclone a bit more toward the south in the Bay of Campeche, moving off toward mainland Mexico. This was a look at the 12Z UK Met forecast. We don't have access beyond 72 hours to this model just yet, but as you can see, the Day 3 UK Met is also showing a broad area of low pressure in the same general region as the other models are showing. And again, that's that same tropical wave that's currently over the Windward Islands. It should be in this general area by Day 3, and then by days 5 and 6 it should be somewhere over the central or southwest Gulf of Mexico. And finally, this is the 12Z ECMWF. This run is hot off the presses, so we don't have the best graphics at this time, but this is the 96-hour forecast, and much like the other models, it does have a broad low nearing the Yucatan Peninsula. By day 5, that broad area of low pressure is beginning to push into the southwest Gulf, and by day 6 we do see a developing 1008 millibar surface low. That is a fairly weak area of low pressure, so the European is not that aggressive on this particular storm just yet, but it is interesting to note that every single model is showing at least a broad area of low pressure worth monitoring in the Gulf between days 5 and 7. And a quick look at the Eastern Pacific reveals that the basin is quiet today, which is certainly good news after Hurricane Beatrice gave us a lot of trouble to work with over the last 72 hours, and the same can also be said for the Eastern and Central Pacific. So once again, all is quiet right now. We're going to be closely monitoring that tropical wave as it begins moving through the Caribbean. We do not expect any development from that wave as it passes just to the south of Hispaniola and Jamaica. However, things could become a bit more interesting as it nears the Yucatan Peninsula and especially the southwest or central Gulf within 6 to 7 days. Now, if that storm were to develop as it began entering the Gulf, it's very far out, and I do not want to get into any scenarios in terms of the track of where it would possibly head or who it would possibly threaten. That would be just somewhat ridiculous this far out to try to forecast. But that will be the main player by the looks of things. So go ahead and check back tomorrow here at 28storms.com for another look at the satellite imagery and the latest model prognostications. Thank you and have a nice day.